Well, let me make it as clear as possible. Uladar is a urban area in Zaporizhia. Zaporizhia is Russia. So ask me that question again. How important is it to Russia? Every inch of Russian soil is important to Russia. Russia's not playing the game on other people's territories right now. I mean, Uladar had a certain strategic relevance. The Ukrainians had fortified it. It was the anchor of the Ukrainian defenses. It had frustrated Russia for 2 years now. That had been repeatedly trying to take it. So, from a military standpoint, Russia finally took what had been one of its objectives, an anchor to the Ukrainian defenses in Zaporizhia, which will unhinge that line and compel the Ukrainians to fall back and dig in another line. Will there be a second Uladar? I don't know. But I don't think, sometimes we lose sight of the fact that Russia's not stopping this war till every inch of Russian territory has been returned to Russia. And all of Zaporizhia is considered by Russia to be Russian. All of Donetsk, all of Lugansk, all of Kherson, including the right bank. So from the Russian perspective right now, as stated, their goals and objectives are to regain control of all the territory that is legally Russian. And for all the people that are talking about, well, they're going to draw a new line and freeze it where it is, constitutionally, that's sort of impossible to do because that would require the Russians to say, we're giving up Russian soil. Now, people say, well, you've never really occupied it other than the right bank and maybe some places in Donetsk that they had and then they withdrew, but I think they've captured them again. It doesn't matter. The oblast, the region of Zaporizhia, is Russia from a Russian perspective, constitutionally. All of it belongs to Russia, every square inch. And Russia, I don't see any mechanism where Russia, short of being defeated, stops the conflict. So no matter what happens, those territories will all be returned to Russia, which means Ukrainians are going to have to leave. Now, if Ukrainians are fortunate enough, then the Russians won't make a demand on additional territories. Odessa, Kharkov, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv. Russia has a legitimate claim on all of these because all of them have been used to launch attacks against Russian territory. We'll see what happens, but understand that Russia will do whatever it takes to regain control of every inch of Russian territory. And the only way to stop Russia from doing that is to defeat Russia. And right now, I don't see Russia being defeated on the battlefield.
Does Russia consider Odessa and Nikolaev as its cities?
Well, I mean, there are two questions, legally or historically. Historically, yes. They consider Odessa, Nikolaev, Kharkov, Sumy, these are Russian cities with significant Russian-speaking populations. Legally, Russia hasn't made a claim on these cities at all. You've not seen Russia say anything other than the territories that are Russia belong to Russia and we will occupy them. There may be, some modalities in a post-conflict reality that call for demilitarization of these territories, et cetera. But as of yet, Russia has not made a claim on these territories. Could that change? Absolutely. I would say that, depending on what the final outcome is, if you get a Ukraine that totally capitulates, where Russia is in total control of the political entity, then I don't see the need to transfer Odessa to Russian control. But if the conflict ends with a Ukraine that has a modicum of independence in terms of governance, Russia can never again allow Ukraine to be Ukraine to control Odessa because of the threat Odessa poses on Crimea. The same thing with Sumy and Kharkov. These two districts have forfeited their right to have independence because Ukraine has used them to launch attacks into Kursk and into Belgorod. That's unforgivable from the Russian standpoint. And again, for all the people out there saying, tough luck, Russia, just put it, again, imagine the United States and imagine this happening to us. And then imagine what we would do and then stop being hypocritical. Russia's going to do what Russia needs to do to protect Russian interests. And they're sort of not in the mood to negotiate anymore. I get a chuckle when I hear, former Secretary General, Stoltenberg and the new one, Rutte, and, everybody else, talking about this, that, and the other thing. They don't count. I mean, you think Russia cares? Russia doesn't care about them anymore. Doesn't pay attention. It's just talk, talk, talk. Russia's in the business of winning this war, which means whatever you want to bring to Ukraine, Russia will consume, eat, spit out, chew out, kill, destroy, and keep moving. That's the reality.
Lavrov today was talking about long-range missiles. It seems that there's still concern about the United States sending long-range missiles to Ukraine. Do you think that the Biden administration would risk to send these long-range missiles to Ukraine before 2024 presidential election?
I don't think it's a matter of before or after. It's a nuclear war if they do. So I think Russia made that point as clear as possible, that if you do that, there will be consequences, and these consequences will be dire. And then if people want to know what dire means, go buy Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War Scenario, and read it, and you'll understand how in 72 minutes the entire world ends. That's the consequences, guys. My wife always tells me, don't read the comments. Don't read the comments. For all you stupid people out there, and I call you stupid, and I'd call it to you in your face, because this gets insulting after, not me personally, but humanity. All the things you're advocating for will inevitably lead to the destruction of the entire world. Now, you're sitting there playing stupid troll games. That's fine. You can do that. It's free speech. Yay, yay, yay. Good job. But understand the consequences of what you're talking about. And this is where the rest of you have to get pissed off, because you're literally talking about killing you. The interesting thing about Annie Jacobson's book, I just bought it this last weekend and spent all day Sunday reading it back and forth twice, is that while it's a work of fiction, it's derived from interviews she had with the guys who will do all the jobs that are mentioned in the book. So she didn't make anything up. It's there, how things would happen, decisions that would have to be made, etc. And the frustrating thing is how at some point in time, the nuclear employment plan, the nuclear posture goes on full automatic, and rational thought no longer applies. I mean, when you have, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon, knowing the nuclear weapon's going to hit him and he's going to be dead in 36 seconds, still pretending as he was in command, issuing orders. When the world has already ended and you have the head of Strategic Command in his airborne command post coordinating the launch of missiles to kill even millions of more people, hundreds of millions of more people, even though soon he's going to run out of fuel and there's no place to land and he's going to die too. It's on full automatic. The world ends automatically. So anybody out there thinking, well, no rational person would let this happen. It's on full automatic. And all you have to do is cross that initial threshold. So for all you idiots out there talking about let's give the Ukrainians the weapons so they can strike targets deep inside Russia, that's the initial threshold. All right? And everybody else needs to act accordingly. So, these trolls, pound sand, go to hell, die. I don't care. But stop being stupid, because you're literally saying you want to commit suicide. And that's your business if all you want to do is take yourself out. But the policies that you're promulgating are policies that will lead to the deaths of humanity. Because once you have a war on the scope and scale of a general nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia, which, by the way, is automatic once any initial threshold has been crossed. That's the interesting thing. It doesn't matter. The thing that Annie Jacobson brings up, you say, well, if the United States goes to a nuclear war with North Korea, it doesn't matter. If we fire 150 Minuteman III to North Korea, how do they get there? All you rocket scientists. They have to overfly Russian soil. And now the Russians are looking at 150 missiles coming in and going, that could also be a decapitating strike against all our stuff. Let's say the Russians don't fire, but now these missiles hit inside North Korea and the radioactive fallout goes into Vladivostok and kills 4 million people. I think the Russians just take that and go, oh, that's okay. What happens when the Chinese, when the radiation hits North Korean sites, goes across to China and kills 20 million people? Chinese are going to go, oh, that's okay too? There's no limiting this stuff. It's insane. It's insane. Once it starts, you can't fire. The Trident missiles are the most destabilizing missile in our arsenal, because the second they're launched at any target, North Korea or anywhere, the people who are potential nuclear adversaries of the United States have to assume that this is a preemptive decapitation strike against them, whether you're China or Russia. And since they operate on what's called launch on detect, which we have, by the way, too, the second you detect a launch that has a probability of a nuclear strike on your soil, you must launch everything, because you can't afford to leave anything in the ground. So everything gets launched. Yeah, I got it, you pro-Ukrainian trolls out there. Pound sand. Kiss my ass. I don't care. But stop. I just want everybody else to realize how stupid this line of thinking is. You don't have to agree with me on anything. You can say, Scott, you're wrong on Ukraine. Scott, you're wrong on Iran. I ain't wrong on nuclear war, guys. And I'm not willing to gamble to be proven wrong. All right? Having Ukraine at this stage in the conflict, or at any stage in the conflict, seek to turn things around by firing long-range missiles, foreign-made, into Russian soil, isn't going to change the outcome of the war in Ukraine, but it could very well determine the fate of all humanity.
J.D. Vance, in a new article, Scott, in the American Conservative, he's talking about the points that in his mind that would put an end to the conflict in Ukraine. And the main point, the first point that he says that Russia receives already occupied territories, and which is in the hand of Russians. And it seems that he doesn't consider Ukraine being part of NATO. And the third part of this article says Germany restores Ukraine. How, in your opinion, why every time he's talking about Ukraine, he's talking about Germany building up Ukraine? What's in it for Germany, and why they have destroyed Germany's economy, and right now they want Germany to build Ukraine? And where is the root of this type of mindset?
Ignorance. Ignorance, plain so. J.D. Vance, I mean, I respect the guy. I mean, he's a senator, state of Ohio. Former Marine. Well, not really. He graduated boot camp and then he became a combat correspondent. And he did a tour in Iraq where he reported on the air wing activities. His job needs to be done. But you understand the strategic insight a corporal has, because that's the rank he got out as. Most of his time was spent as a lance corporal, so an E3. No disrespect to E3s, they're the heart and they're the meat and bones of all military organizations, but they have no clue whatsoever about the big picture, even in their unit. They don't know anything about the logistics that goes into making their unit work. They don't sit there and do the logistical planning. They don't do the operational planning. They're just the nuts and bolts. And so J.D. Vance emerged from the Marine Corps with zero understanding of anything in the world. Hate to say it to you, J.D., but it's true. And the proof is that you haven't carried any lessons you may have learned by your military service over into, the policies you promulgate today. Total ignorance. He doesn't know anything about Ukraine, nothing. He doesn't know anything about Israel or Iran, nothing. He doesn't know anything about Germany, nothing. What he does know is that, he listens to the pulse of the people here in the United States, and he senses a growing frustration about the Ukraine conflict. But because he doesn't know anything about it, and he's loath to say anything that could be spun as being sympathetic to Putin, like, hey, JD, why don't you take advantage of the people you have access to now and find out about the CIA's relationship with the organization Ukrainian Nationalists, the Bandera Wing, how we funded them from 1948 and up until 1990, how we continue to fund them today, how we used them to fulfill, to foment a coup d'etat in 2014, how the CIA has been working with them in secret since then to do X, Y, and Z. And then you might understand the source of Russia's angst. But he doesn't do that. So what he knows is that the war has to come to an end. So he picks the politically expedient thing, thinking that Russia's ready for this war to come to an end. I mean, did he talk to the Russians? JD, did you talk to the Russians? And say, hey, if we freeze it right now where it's at, constitutionally, you guys okay with that? You'll give up all those territories that, constitutionally you say belong to you, but you'll give them up, right? Just to bring this war an end, to make me happy, to fulfill my campaign pledge, to make the voters know how to vote for me more, and to make America. Russia's not going to go along with this. This is stupidity in the extreme. Stupidity in the extreme. The same thing, Germany. Germany's economy is collapsing as we speak. The idea that Germany, A, has the economic wherewithal, and B, the political will to take responsibility for building up. But it's a throwaway statement that JD put out there because he wants Europe to be rebuilding it. He wants Ukraine to be, linked because somebody briefed him how the Germans are close with the Banderas. Oh, they are, by the way. The German intelligence service, when it was created, the B&D, was originally part of, this General Galen's Eastern Intelligence Network, sort of. And one of the things the Eastern Intelligence Network did is work with the Banderists while the Nazis occupied the former Soviet territories, the former Polish territories, Belarusian territories. And even after the Germans pulled out, they would parachute in these teams that would hook up with them and coordinate this. And the Germans were supplying it up until the very end, receiving intelligence up until the very end. And when the war ended and American military intelligence came in, they said, oh, don't stop receiving that intelligence. Keep those systems alive. We want to know what's going on. And so these Nazis, literal war criminals, were kept alive, formed, organized, worked for the United States, later worked for the CIA. We took over that. And we've been working with the Banderas, who are literal Nazis, ever since. And the Germans have been part and parcel of that. So maybe JD knew about that. I doubt he did, though. But I think he understands that there's some connectivity between the Germans and the Ukrainians from a historical standpoint, and that somehow that would be conducive to Germany overseeing the reconstruction. But the reality is Europe can't reconstruct Ukraine. Europe doesn't have enough money to reconstruct Ukraine. And when this is done, I don't know if Russia is going to want Ukraine to be reconstructed by Europe. I think actually Ukraine's going to be reconstructed by BRICS, and that's going to keep Ukraine into the Russian orbit. That's the fate of Ukraine. Ukraine could have been an independent entity as recently as June had they accepted Vladimir Putin's terms, which were basically an extension of the April 2022 terms, the so-called Istanbul Communique, modified to take into account the reality of Russia's ownership of Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Zelensky said no. Now he's going to pay the price, but Germany's not going to rebuild. J.D. Vance is dumber than dirt. Donald Trump's dumber than dirt. This is a man who thinks he's going to pick up the phone and convince Vladimir Putin to do whatever he wants. Joe Biden, we know, is dumber than dirt. Kamala Harris, that would be, too. None of them understand the realities that they're in right now. The United States doesn't have a vote unless it wants a nuclear war. Other than that, we've become irrelevant because what more can we do? That's the question that has to be asked. What more can we do? And then when you define what we can do, then the question has to be asked, how much more will we actually do? Just because we can do it doesn't mean that politically it will be supported. And I think Americans are tired of giving money away to Ukraine. That's the bottom line, especially, after, the Hurricane Helene. And now we've got, I forget is it Martin? Is that the one coming in next? Or Marvin or Martin? Supposed to be category 5, category 6, unprecedented damage is going to happen. And remember, these are, if Biden thinks he's winning Florida, he's crazy. And if he thinks he's winning Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, he's even crazier. If he thinks he's winning Tennessee, he's insane. Because all these people now have seen the reality of the Biden government. Now, it would have been the Trump government. I'm saying Trump would have been in the same position because the U.S. government in general has failed the American people and will continue to fail the American people. But the American people now are looking at how easily we transfer $8 billion to Israel, $8 billion to Ukraine, but we can only give $750 maybe to American citizens in need. So I think the American people are tired. And then every American citizen has to ask himself, what happens if it comes to me? What happens if there's an earthquake in California? The United States government will abandon you every much as we abandon people. In upstate New York, what happens is there's a catastrophe there. Out west, massive wildfires. The U.S. government will abandon you because they don't care about you. They do care about Israel, apparently. They do care about Ukraine. They'll pour good money after bad there, but they're not going to give the money to the American people that the American people need. And even Trump has said, people, wake up. He won't send aid to California because California didn't vote for him. Well, don't run for president, you idiot. Get used to the fact that even if you're president, it means a lot of Americans didn't vote for you. If you're lucky, only 40% didn't vote for you. If you're unlucky, 49% didn't vote for you. But the bottom line is, you're not a dictator. You don't have a complete mandate, and you have to serve all of the people, even those who didn't vote for you. And yet he's out there saying straight up, I'm not going to send aid money to California because of Gavin Newsom and California politics. I'm sorry, Mr. Wannabe president. That dog don't hunt. I mean, the bottom line is we don't have a qualified person running for president. J.D. Vance is an idiot. Donald Trump's a buffoon. Joe Biden's senile, and Kamala Harris is fake. That's it. We got Jill Stein.
Good one. Scott, when we look at the bigger picture of the world, in Ukraine, we've passed the breaking point between the United States and Russia, and the situation is so dangerous right now. And in the Middle East, we are approaching a breaking point and a major war between Iran and Israel. And if Trump wins, we can definitely say that the situation between the United States and China would worsen. And how do you see the diplomacy, the current state of diplomacy in the United States, and how do you see the future? Do we have any sort of hope to have at least somebody in Washington to talk with these powers and these military powers, these regional powers, global powers?
There's no diplomacy right now. We don't do diplomacy. We dictate. We dictate solutions. We dictate outcomes. The National Security Strategy in the United States, published by the Biden administration in 2022, said that the maintenance of the rules-based international order is the foundation of American foreign policy. That means the maintenance of American global hegemony. The world is rejecting that. We see that with BRICS. It's just not happening. And even the Biden administration admits that's the case. But we don't have a plan B to fall back on. We don't have, diplomats out there trying to, implement a mitigating strategy to the collapse of American influence around the world. Russia just pulled a genuine diplomat, Anatoly Antonov, out of the United States. He'd been serving here since 2017. I had the honor and privilege to have lunch with him on a number of occasions and to attend functions at the embassy where I was able to talk with him. The man negotiated the last arms control treaty between Russia and the United States, the New START treaty in 2010. The man is an expert on America, speaks fluent English, understands our country better than many Americans understand it. And yet for 7 years, he was ignored by the United States. And his last major action as a diplomat was to tell the United States that if you fire these long-range missiles into Russia, there will be a nuclear war. Imagine that, a man who wanted to promote arms control, a man who wanted to promote good relations with the United States and Russia, his last official act was to say, we will go to nuclear war against you. So he's gone. He left. Who knows who was going to replace him, but doesn't matter because we don't talk to them. We ignored them. It was frustrating to go to the embassy and see this man saying, this is my job, and they're not letting me do my job. That's the fact. We don't have diplomats anymore. We have, because a diplomat requires, you speak to Chas Freeman, Ambassador Freeman. He's a diplomat, quintessential diplomat. He has a deep understanding of the world. He's pro-American, and he will promote pro-American policies, but he understands the consequences of these policies, and he will inform people about, if we do this, this should happen, because he has a deep appreciation for the world that we live in. And he respects the other people as well. Again, he's an American. He will promote American policies, but he will also try to make those policies as realistic and responsible as possible. He was the ambassador to Saudi Arabia during Desert Storm. I can't say I met him at that time. I didn't, but I know of him. I worked closely with the political advisor that advised him, and I read his cables, so I know where he was coming from. Jack Matlock was one of the last, second to last American ambassador to the Soviet Union. He left his job in August of 1991, right before the coup against Gorbachev, but he was there during the critical period of time of disarmament and perestroika, glasnost, etc. Read his book, Anatomy of an Empire, and Anatomy of the Fall of an Empire. It's up here someplace. I just read it, but the depth of comprehension and understanding of the complexities of the Soviet Union and Russia are manifest throughout. Then read Michael McFaul's book about his experience, and you'll see that he has no understanding of Russia, no understanding of anything. He's just a pure propagandist for the United States. To produce a diplomat, to produce a Jack Matlock and a Chaz Freeman, you have to have an enterprise that is willing to produce such people, and that starts in academia. You have to have people that can enter into institutions of higher learning, Stanford, Georgetown, Harvard, Yale, all these places where the great minds gather. And those institutions have to allow them to be open in their exploration of these different issues. You know, during the Cold War, people used to go to Leningrad for 6-month tours, go to Moscow for 6-month semesters abroad. Even though it was the Cold War, that was the evil empire, we actively encouraged people to go over and meet these people and talk to them. When the Soviets came here, you would attend their functions, meet them, talk to them. That was encouraged, not because we were afraid, we weren't afraid that the Russians were going, oh my God, if you're exposed to Soviet thinking, you're going to go over. No, we were confident in who we were and what we were, and so confident we said, learn everything you can about them so that we can effectively interact with them. Today, sadly, that's just literally not what happens. We have people in these institutions that are former CIA, former State Department. These are all ideologues, Russophobes, and their whole job is to create cookie cutter people. My daughter went to Georgetown. She went to the Foreign Institute, Foreign Service Institute, studied, Southern Caucasian affairs. That's Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, in relationship to Russia. Had to take some Russian history courses, Russian political courses, Russian language to understand that. I brought her with me to Russia last December in January. She had a unique opportunity to see Russia, to interface. I took her to Chechnya with me. She got to meet Ramzan Kadyrov, have lunch with him, ask him questions. She got to meet Abdiel Adanov. She got to meet Adam, name escapes me right now. She got to meet all the senior Chechen leadership and talk with them, interact with them. She got to go to museums and have the head of museums talk to her about what she's seeing, go to the big mosque, meet with the imam and talk about the importance of religion in Chechnya. I mean, these are just amazing opportunities. And when she returned to Georgetown, I have to tell you, in my day, had I done a trip like that, my administration would brought me in and said, Scott, we need you to host some seminars. We want to bring people in. We'd like to talk to you. Can you do a special event? My professor said, could you write a paper about that? We're very interested in what you saw, what you learned. Her fellow students said, why don't you quit? You disgrace the institution. How dare you travel there? How dare you meet with Ramzan Kadyrov? How dare you do these things? And this was supported by Georgetown leadership. And I'm like, wait a minute, Georgetown, read your own damn rules. You're violating your own code of conduct, academic ethics. You're supposed to be open-minded, never question people's attempts to learn. And yet she came back knowing things that none of your damn professors know. How many Georgetown professors have met with Ramzan Kadyrov and can talk intelligently about Chechnya's posture vis-a-vis Georgia? None. She could, because she did. Talked to Abdiel Adanov about the problem of integration of Chechnya in the post-Chechen War conflict. She was there. She was in that conversation. These are important things. It doesn't mean that you yield the floor to Kader's posture and all this stuff. It means that you've educated yourself, you've informed yourself, and now you come back and you contribute this knowledge to a broader debate, discussion, and dialogue about how America deals with this region. Georgetown wasn't interested because they're not interested in free thinkers, the kind of free thinkers we need to have effective diplomacy. We can't have effective diplomacy if we don't have effective diplomats. And if we're not training effective diplomats, we'll never have effective diplomats. So until the entire system is purged and we come in with a new a way of training, we have to purge everything, not just get rid of an administration, but we have to knock out 80% of the teachers in these institutions. We have to purge the ranks of all the people that have closed minds. We have to start bringing in people with open minds so that when we send a diplomat abroad, they are the modern day equivalent of a Chas Freeman and a Jack Matlock, and not just simply a cookie cutter of Michael McFaul.
Can you hear me, Scott?
I can hear you. I can't see you, but
yeah, just let me check it out. What's going on here? Yeah, sorry for that.
Oh, no problem. I mean, maybe we're getting jammed.
Yeah, I think
YouTube's been kicking off everybody who has me on. So,
And Scott, when you talk about the situation right now in the United States, but on the other hand, we have Iran, Russia, and China. How do they think about the situation, in your opinion? How do they find, are they, the question would be, in the way that you're describing the situation in the United States, that would bring some sort of shock to these countries because they want to negotiate, they want to talk with the United States. But do you think at the end of the day, these hardliners in these countries would prevail to not to talk with Washington, to go after some sort of aggressive attitude toward the United States?
Let me put it this way. If you think of diplomacy as control rod, imagine the world's geopolitical system as a nuclear reactor. And if we don't have diplomacy, it'll blow up. It'll go critical and blow up. Diplomacy are the control rods that are inserted into the reactor to keep it under control, to keep it functioning, keep it moving. So you need that. Now, each control rod is a different part of the world. So, if you lose a certain number of control rods, it's going to start overheating, and you need to reinsert them, or you're going to have a problem. Now, each one is its own little universe. Let's focus on Russia and America for a second. Back in the Cold War, when Russia was the evil empire, we engaged in diplomacy like you wouldn't believe across the board. And the Soviet Foreign Ministry and the Department of State had, a variety of offices that dealt with all the ways America interacted with the Soviet Union. And each office had the phone number of their counterpart, and you had the phone book. And so you say, oh, let's say I'm the desk officer for, I don't know, avian flu. And someone said, Scott, the European sparrow, I'm not going to go into a Mighty Python skit. European sparrows are starting to drop dead. And we don't understand it, but the migration path of the European sparrow takes it over, Armenia and Azerbaijan through Georgia into Turkey. Could you find out if anything's going on? I open up the phone book and I look over and I got my Soviet counterpart, European sparrow guy. I've met at a couple conferences. I've gone to European sparrow conferences and avian flu conferences. We've met, we've talked. I met his wife on occasion. I introduced him to my wife and all that stuff. So I know who he is. Call him up. Hey, Sergey, how you doing? Yeah, it's Scott. Hey, got a question, man. I mean, what you can tell me, but what do you know about European sparrows dropping dead in Armenia? Is anything like this happening? Hey, Scott, I don't, it's not crossed my radar, but I'll get back to you. I'll look at it. And he would come back and go, yeah, look, let's say it's sensitive. Let's say there was a nuclear accident. You can't talk about it. Scott, what I'm going to tell you right now is I can't tell you anything. Understand the situation I'm in. That tells me everything. Then I come back and I say something might be happening in Armenia, or you can say, "No, man, there's nothing going on. We've been doing it. I have some data I can send you." Da 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 da, and we talk. We're not making treaties. We're not making policy. We're talking. We're communicating, and we're making problems go away before they manifest themselves. And that happened from the bottom of the phone book all the way up to the top of the phone book. That kind of connectivity taking place. When I spoke to Russian diplomats over the course of the last few years, we would talk about the phone book. They said, well, for a while we continued to staff, and this especially happened during the Trump administration, because Trump came in and just refused to fill a lot of these positions in the State Department because he's Donald Trump and he's the smartest man in the world, and these stupid bureaucrats can't do anything right. Da 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 da. So he just didn't fill them. They said, well, we were there, but I mean, why pay a guy to sit at a desk when there's nobody on the other end? They pick up the phone, they call, nobody answers. Pick up the phone, they call, nobody answers. So we reassign them. And what happens if you don't exercise the muscle of diplomacy is it atrophies. The body adapts. We don't know how to do diplomacy anymore because we don't have the various mechanisms in place. And it's the same thing to a lesser degree with China, because what we tend to do is dictate, not negotiate. We dictate outcomes. And so when we're in the business of dictating, you don't need all these desk officers because there's nothing that can be done. They're waiting for the dictation to take place. And so the Chinese and the Americans, that diplomacy is starting to atrophy as well. Not as bad as what's happened with Russia. It's a real tragedy. It's very dangerous because, again, arms control. We spent decades from the late 1960s all the way up till 2010 building the muscle of arms control in diplomacy. Now, we had, John Kennedy built a agency called the Arms Control Disarmament Agency in 1961, totally dedicated to arms control. Imagine that. And it worked till 1999 when Bill Clinton went, superfluous, get rid of it, and we'll drop down its functions to other places. But by diluting that, what you're saying is arms control not important anymore. It's not important to us anymore. And what happened is the nuclear infrastructure that used to have to deal with the Arms Control Disarmament Agency from a negotiation standpoint, making sure that everything we did complied with the intent of disarmament set forth by the executive, that wasn't there anymore. And they took over. And having the military in charge of nuclear policies, like having the fox guard the chicken, the hen house, all the eggs are going to go gone and the hens are going to get eaten. Can't have that. But we don't have that anymore. We don't know how to do arms control anymore. We don't have, the Paul Nietzsche's or the Warnke's and these geniuses that grew up during the Cold War and understood it, knew all of their Russian and Soviet counterparts, and they knew how they thought. They understood how to make things happen. That's all gone, and nobody's doing it. We don't do arms control anymore. There's nobody that does it. So how do we, at this most critical time in the nuclear era, where we need arms control now more than ever, we need people to be talking, working. We don't have anybody that does it. It's atrophied. We're going to have to reinvent the wheel, and this isn't the time. This is like being in a Formula One race. And you know how the car comes in, you need the pit crew to come out and pop, 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 pop with the tires to gas it up and get going. This is like in the middle of the race saying, get rid of the pit crew and let's bring in the high school home economics class. Hey guys, you've been to auto, you guys learned what a car looks like. Well, today you're going to be the pit crew for a Formula One crew. And you're like, what? And the car comes in and nothing's going to happen because they have no clue what they're doing. They don't even know. And it's a disaster. That's what arms control negotiations look like today. We have nobody qualified to do it because we haven't trained anybody. So what happens is we pick ideologues that come out of those institutions who are Russophobes. To give you an example of how dangerous this is, during the Trump administration, they had an assistant secretary of defense who gave a presentation at the Arms Control Association where he literally said it is the goal and objective of the Trump administration for Chinese and Russian leadership to wake up every morning not knowing whether or not today's the day America is going to nuke them. That's dead serious. He said it. Do you understand the insanity of what I just said? That the goal was to have the Russians and the Chinese wake up every morning not knowing whether today was the day America was going to nuke them. Imagine if the Russians came out and said, that's our goal. We want Americans to wake up every morning not knowing whether or not we're going to nuke them. We turn around and say, well, Christ, guys, we got to be ready for this. Let's get our nuclear forces forward deployed, ready, hair trigger, in case they come at us, launch on detect. We got to go. We got to go. We got to be ready to go. And you don't have anybody going, time out, back up. Let's work this thing through. We don't want anybody waking up in the morning to think anybody's ready to nuke them. So how do we make that? We de-target we used to do that. We de-targeted our ICBMs. That meant that they're sitting in the silo dumb. So if there's ever an accident, fire, they just go and they don't go anywhere. But now, no, we have a certain number of them already preloaded, ready with the war plan. Same thing with our Trident submarines. It's just the reality we're at today because we don't do arms control anymore. We don't have, it's not only that we've lost the muscle memory, we don't have the muscle. We got nothing. We got to start over. So that's why, I'd like to hear from Donald Trump. I know that RFK Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. wrote a nice, interesting piece in The Hill, and I appreciate the effort that went into that. But there's no mention of arms control. RFK Jr. is a big proponent of his father, Jack, or his uncle Jack. I'd like to hear him talk about what the Trump administration is going to do to create a new arms control disarmament agency. How's arms control going to factor into that? Hell, I'd like to hear Jill Stein say that. She has a brief statement about we will support general nuclear disarmament. How are you going to do that, Jill? Are you going to create the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency? How are you going to make arms control work? How are you going to walk down from the current nuclear employment plan? What argument will you make to Congress that says you actually know what the hell you're talking about so that they can support you walking down from a nuclear employment plan? What is your nuclear posture going to be? Is it going to be launch on detect, or is it going to be sole purpose deterrence only? And if you need help knowing about this, Jill, there's people out there willing to talk to you. But if you continue to ignore it and just move forward, we lose confidence in you. And we know that the Biden administration isn't going to do a damn thing because Joe Biden, although he gave lip service to sole purpose doctrine when he ran for president, as soon as he became president, he recertified launch on detect, preemptive nuclear strike, and now he's expanded the nuclear employment in very dangerous ways that create the possibility for inadvertent nuclear conflict at any time. And Kamala Harris is just too stupid to live. She doesn't know anything about anything I've just said, and I don't know if she could ever be brought up to speed on it because, again, she lacks the cognitive capability. So we're in a lot of trouble. We need to make nuclear disarmament one of our top priorities as a nation so that when people say they want to be the chief executive of the United States, they understand how important it is for them to get, read up on this issue. But right now, nope, the American people don't care. We're not talking about it. So why should the politicians talk about it? And the military is not going to let the State Department get involved. They're just going to say, we got it under control. Read Annie Jacobson's book, and let me tell you what happens when the military says they have it under control. That means they're going to launch all of their nuclear weapons anytime they want to, anytime they feel like it. Read the book. I'm not making it up.